thinking that it's important to put out a video how to purchase a firearm if you are a beginner. What is the best gun to buy? You are a beginner. I'm asked all the time, what is the best gun to buy? I've never had a firearm before, protect myself, my family, but I have no idea what I'm looking for. What I thought I would do is put together this video, the 7 basic firearms for self-defense, home defense. There are so many more to choose from. These are just your 7 basics. There are numerous, dozens upon dozens upon dozens of different size bullets, different calibers. But if you're a beginner, this is just a video to kind of simplify things. Give you just a little bit of background. I've been in the gun business 7 years. Started out a big chain store, and later I went to a local gun shop, a large amount of business. But just to give you an idea, the local gun shop, we topped over $2 million. The demand for firearms is, you understand, this is a very controversial issue. And there are a lot of people in this country that want nothing to do with firearms. My view is if you need to defend yourself or your family, a firearm can be the ultimate equalizer. I am not a firearms instructor. If you decide it is time for you to get a firearm, I highly suggest you look at your local businesses and search out a local instructor and take lessons. Firearm can basically end your life in at least 3 different ways, but there are more. You mistakenly shoot yourself, don't realize the gun is loaded, use the firearm, it's not justified. You end up going to court, being charged, and spend a large part of your life behind bars. Another reason, firearm can end your life. You decide you're going to carry a firearm, you get into an altercation with someone, and they take that firearm away from you and use it against you. Get you a good instructor, learn how to use that firearm, store the firearm safely, lock it up. You don't want someone breaking into your home when you're gone, and there's your firearm laying there loaded. So you got to be responsible. So do all the research, do all the training if you're going to take this next step and purchase that firearm. So the one thing about firearms, working the counter for over 7 years, is what I noticed over and over again. People, especially if you don't know firearms, are very intimidated to walk into a gun store. And I got to admit, for good reason. A lot of gun salesmen, kind of the macho type, you walk up to the counter, they're going to put a gun in front of you. They really don't have the time to explain. A lot of gun salesmen just have the mentality that, hey, you don't know what a 9mm is, you don't know what a 22 is. Come on, where you been, in a cave? I quickly realized, working in the business, there's a need for the simplistic explanation of a firearm. From there, people start getting comfortable. I know a lot of people out there are thinking about maybe getting a firearm. That's why I think the timing of this video is good. Here's the 7 basic sizes of firearms that you should consider if you're a first-time buyer. I'm hoping that this video will help you feel a little bit more comfortable about going in and purchasing your first firearm. So we'll start out with the 22. Obviously the smaller of the bullets. Actually had people come into the gun store before. When a 22 is mentioned, the comment comes out, that thing, there's no way that wouldn't even kill anybody. That's not correct. Even though this bullet is small, this bullet is deadly. The problem with this bullet is you don't have much stopping power. If you had an assailant coming at you with a knife, and if you used a 22, eventually it will stop the person charging you. But their momentum is going to slow down but they can still come forward. Out of the 7 choices here, the 380 Auto may be one of the best firearm purchases you can make as a beginner. 380 Auto is going to be controllable. It's going to have a little bit of a snap to it, but nothing compared to the 45 Auto. Big difference in those 2 bullets right there. That's why a lot of people starting out choose a 380 Auto. Another reason is you can buy a 380 Auto pretty small handgun. One that's easy to conceal, one that can even stick in your back pocket. The 45 Auto, a lot of guys think this is the only way to go, that this is the holy grail of bullets right here. If you are a beginner, be careful if somebody talks you into getting a 45. Unless you're going to put the practice in, it will do you no good if you can't hit the side of a barn with this big bullet. Buy something smaller, buy a 380, get used to shooting it, move to a 9mm, then maybe get a 45. But to go out for your first firearm and get a 45, I don't know. Doesn't seem like a real good idea to me. You're going to make that decision. So your choice when you walk into a gun shop. Do you want a semi-automatic pistol or do you want a revolver? Can you pull the slide back on a semi-automatic? Do you feel comfortable about pulling the slide back on a semi-automatic? Is a revolver a better choice? You install the bullets, pull the trigger. Here's a classic semi-automatic firearm. This is a Bersa 380. Before I go any further, the firearms I have sitting on this table and behind me are all unloaded, double and triple checked. Here's a 357 Magnum revolver. Those are the 2 choices you're going to make. Hundreds of styles between a semi-automatic and even a revolver, but this is your 2 basic models. A couple things before I show you how a semi-automatic works compared to a revolver. You want to pay attention to how the gun salesman handles the firearm. If he's good, he's going to show you some things right off the bat that you need to know. Now here's a good example. When a firearm is presented, the firearm salesman should never say, okay, here, try this gun. Because there's a thing called muzzle sweep. And this is what a muzzle sweep is. I just swung that firearm right at you and over this way. So a good salesman will never ever muzzle sweep his customer. So that firearm is basically going to be handed to you this way. So what you want to do is you kind of want to watch how the salesman does handle the firearm and just mimic his behavior. All stores are different, but the one thing some stores will do, which I always did, when it comes to firearms, mentally you have to assume every firearm in that case, in that counter that you walked into, is loaded. None of them should be. It would be rare to ever find a bullet in any of those firearms, but mistakes happen and nothing is infallible. When I handled a firearm and I was going to show it to the customer, the very first thing I would do is I would bring the magazine out of it and show the customer that it's empty. There are no bullets. And I would rack it back, make sure the customer was watching me, and I would look inside and I would make sure there was not a bullet inside this chamber right here. So once I pulled it back and I cleared it, I'd put it back in the firearm and then I would hand it to the customer. If someone is good with firearms, somebody knows what they're doing, they understand the process, they know what I just did, I've cleared it. Your experts, once I hand it to them, will mimic that exact procedure. Even though I did it right there, you don't ever assume that that gun is empty. Here's also an important technique that you want to learn and you want to never forget. This here is a trigger. Your finger should never touch that trigger unless you are ready to fire that firearm. Now the only exception would be every firearm, a certain amount of pounds on that trigger. Somebody wants to feel How much pressure does it take to actually pull that trigger and cause that bullet to go off? The firearm is aimed in a very safe direction. They'll pull the trigger to find out what it feels like. But if you handle a firearm, always handle a firearm with your trigger finger straight out. If a salesman grabs a gun and hands it to you, don't grab the gun and do this. Right away, everybody knows you're a beginner. Now that's okay, because maybe you are a beginner, but that's a very valuable lesson to learn. Keep your finger off the trigger unless you're going to use the firearm. So this is a 380 auto Versa. A lot of different manufacturers out there. There's Smith & Wesson, there's Ruger, Sig, Sawyer. There's so many different models. Now, how this gun works, it does have a magazine, so it would be a magazine. So if I say clip every now and then, that's just some bad habits that I learned before I got into the gun business. This magazine right here will hold about 9 shells. Take your shell one by one, you place it on there, you push it down and push it in. And then one after the other, it stacks on there, and it goes down all the way to the bottom until you have a full magazine ready to go. So you decide to buy a firearm, please do all the research in the world and take the training. Even loading a gun, if you're really going to use it for self-defense and that moment does come and you have to use it, you want to make sure you put your bullets in right and everything is ready to go. So practice, practice, practice. Take the lessons, go to the range, shoot a couple hundred rounds through it. Just get real comfortable with that firearm that you just purchased. Your bullets are now loaded up into your magazine. Your magazine then goes inside your firearm and you push it in until it locks in. So now you have bullets all up in here, a line of bullets. A lot of times it's debated, is that firearm loaded now or not? Technically, the firearm still will not fire. There is not a bullet in the chamber. If I pull this trigger, the firearm will not go off because there's not a bullet in the chamber. Magazine, full of bullets, firearm, no bullet in that chamber at all. Magazine loaded, goes in. Still, there's not a bullet in that chamber. In order to make this firearm ready to fire, that is a semi-automatic functional firearm. It's a simple procedure, but you got to know what you're doing. You got to know that you're able to do that. It's one of the things that the salesman will be able to show you. Brings me to our next choice, a revolver. On a revolver, you have a button on the side. You push that button, the cylinder comes out. See that? You can see right through it. The simplicity of a revolver this firearm is ready to fire. Kind of in a way a lot simpler, and a lot of people like that, especially beginners like that. In fact, there's some instructors here in town. In order to take their course, you have to buy a .38 revolver. That's what they want you to show up to class with. They don't want to have to deal with a semi-automatic. They want to be able to have someone push a button, bring the cylinder out. This is not a firearm safety course in any way whatsoever. I'm just trying to explain basics, the bone basics for you. So when you walk into that gun shop, you kind of got some knowledge already. And in fact, you can take some things from this video and then get on your Google search, get on YouTube, look at different things, and things are going to start making a little more sense to you. Remember, the one advantage of a firearm is it levels the playing field. So it doesn't matter what size person you are. It doesn't matter what size of a person that's getting ready to attack you and hurt your family and do major bodily harm or death. Firearm will level that playing field. Is there a place for a firearm in your house? You are the only one that can make that decision. One thing that you always hear in the gun business is that the police show up to crime scenes. If you think about that, you might want to consider getting something to defend yourself. For you. Okay, remember that 22 bullet? The small 22 bullet. A lot of people do use that as self-defense, and it is a deadly bullet. And the reason why is it's quiet. When it enters, it scrambles around and does a lot of damage. Firearm to consider would be this one right here. This is a Beretta Bobcat. And then this gun's got a nice little feature. It's got a little flip up on it. Load your magazine. Small, it's tiny. If you shot this gun, it would just basically, it wouldn't even hardly kick like that. The advantage is, if you've got 9 or 10 shots in here, chances are all 9 and 10 are going to hit center body mass because there's no recoil. You go into a gun shop, you tell them that you want looking for a self-defense pistol. This is your first time and you'd like a 22. Probably 90% of the time the salesman's going to try to talk you out of it. Granted, a 22 just doesn't have that thumping power, that stopping power, and that's pretty important if you do have an assailant that is actually charging at you. The bigger the bullet size, the more stopping power that you have. And that's something that you want to consider when you buy that first firearm. So we already talked about the 380 Bersa. This is a nice little firearm. The only drawback on this gun is it's pretty big. Not when you match it up against like a 45 auto. It's a good shooting gun. It's an accurate gun. If you try to take this gun and you try to stuff it in your belt, you know, it still can kind of show unless you've got a really loose shirt on. A lot of women will carry a gun this size in their purse, but it's a little bit heavier too. But let me show you an option. If a 380 auto is maybe the firearm for you, it's concealed, you don't want anybody to know you have it. You want something maybe a little bit smaller that you can conceal. And a good option for that would be this right here. Okay, this is a Ruger 380. And you can see that firearm is getting pretty small when I put it up against my hand. This is one of my all-time favorites. I may carry this with a little holster, but sometimes I'll just slip this in my back pocket. It's almost the size of a wallet. And it has the same 380 bullet in it. And it's got some stopping power. It's a semi-automatic. If you're thinking about, whoa, this is a nice little firearm, I'd kind of like to have one like that. You got to make sure you have enough strength in your hands that you can grab that slide, pull it back. That's the 22. We have looked at a couple different 380s. So let's go with a 9mm. 9mm are the most popular firearm out there. And this is a Taurus 9mm. Now we're getting into what's considered a big gun. Would be very accurate. The longer the barrel, the more accuracy the gun will have. 9mm shell is the one shell you'll always will be able to find. Now we're getting into a lot more kick. So if you're going to fire this gun, you better know what you're doing. You better have you a good grip on this gun and have your aim ready to go. Hold on to this gun. The more you shoot this gun, the easier it'll become. But if you are a beginner and the salesman take you right to a 9mm, this is a big gun. So if you decide to get a 9mm, you have a good firearm. You have stopping power that you need, but you're gonna have to learn to use this gun. You're gonna have to put the time in at the range and the instructions on how to use this gun. Don't buy a cheap gun. Spend a little bit of money on your gun. Think about it. It's the one thing that you're going to buy that could save your life and your family. You want to buy a good quality firearm. Make the investment is the 45 auto. A lot of guys think this is the only way to go, that this is the holy grail of bullets right here. If you are a beginner, be careful if somebody talks you into getting a 45, unless you're going to put the practice in, because it will do you no good if you can't hit the side of a barn with this big bullet. Buy something smaller, buy a 380, get used to shooting it, move to a 9mm, then maybe get a 45. But to go out for your first firearm and get a 45 doesn't seem like a real good idea. On that 357 bullet, on that 357, that would go in this 357 revolver. You can buy 22 revolvers. It would be about half this size. The barrel on them usually come to about right here. Nice little firearm. Sold a lot of them to beginners. I do know there are police officers out there too. If their gun that they normally use is a 9mm or maybe a 40 caliber, they will buy a 22. It's an identical gun, looks just like their 9mm or 40 caliber, but it's 22. And the reason they do that is they can blast off 1,000 shells a week, and they're getting that accuracy and the feel, the muscle reaction to firing that gun with a 22 without spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on ammunition. Of course, they practice with their 9mm too, but it's just one of those ways that they can get used to firing that gun and the muscle memory. There's a reason why people have multiple firearms. I think a lot of times the news media kind of really freaks out about that. Somebody had 5 firearms. Well, you can see that there are reasons to have more than one firearm. You know, you might want a 380, you might want to carry the 380. Maybe it's a high concealment situation and nobody to know you have a firearm on you. You know, you get a smaller 380. You know, you got a bigger gun for your self-defense. If the threat is imminent, and I know it's coming, or I have to go into a horribly bad situation, I'm probably not going to pack this gun. I'm going to pack this gun right here. Or I might even take the revolver. The saying in the firearm business is a revolver rarely, if ever, jams. Now the bad thing is you only have 6 shells in here. You take a semi-automatic, you got 15 shells. Some of them hold 20 shells. The saying is 6 or 7 sure shots are way better than 20 possible jams. When you're in the gun business, you hear it all. Everybody's got an opinion, right? The last 2 things I want to talk about is a self-defense shotgun. 20 gauge versus 12 gauge. So many times somebody walks in there and wants to get a self-defense shotgun and has never had a gun before, but they want something to protect their family, right? I hear the gun salesman push a 12 gauge shotgun. The problem with that is this 12 gauge kicks like a mule. If you're going to use it inside your house for a possible threat of somebody breaking inside your house and stuff, and let's say you have somebody in your family that's smaller, somebody that's not got a lot of strength to them, it's going to be so hard for them to handle this big 12 gauge. Where you can take this 20 gauge. Now, granted, this 20 gauge is going to kick too, but nothing like a 12 gauge. When it comes to home defense, you know, honestly, my choice is a 20 gauge. That's the shell that I like to use. You just don't have that massive recoil, and you still have the results that you need to save your life. So people would come in the gun store and say, hey, I want a shotgun. I said, okay, what for? Self-defense, okay. Well, what are you looking for? I want one of those ones that make a lot of sound when you rack that bullet in there. It's called a pump shotgun. And in the firearm business, if you're a good firearm salesman, you ask a lot of questions. You listen to every word your customer says, but you ask the questions. So anytime somebody come in there and would say that to me, I would say, okay, so why do you want that? Why are you looking for a pump shotgun? Almost every time their response would be, because as soon as that intruder hears the sound of that shotgun, they're going to be fleeing out that door as fast as they can. Here's the shotgun that they're talking about. This is a pump shotgun, okay? That's the sound that they're talking about. The way a shotgun works, once again, these guns have been cleared triple time before the filming. Being in the gun business, you hear about accidents happening all the time. So you just make sure that gun is always unloaded if you're going to handle it, especially for like a demonstration. The gun is clear. No bullets in the gun. This gun right here is more of a hunting gun. The barrel is very long. A home defense gun should have a short barrel on it. It's got to be at least 18.5 inches long, because especially if you're going to have to use this gun and you're in your house and you've got to come around a corner, whatever you need to do, you don't want a big old long barrel sticking out there. Now, a lot of people do. This is the only firearm that they have, and it's the one that they use for their self-defense. But if you're going to buy a self-defense shotgun, buy it with a shorter barrel on it. Let's go back to what that person was saying to me, that they want a shotgun, and the reason why is because that's going to scare that intruder away. Here's my opinion on that. There's several things that I don't like about that scenario. Is one, you gave your position away. So in a bad situation, you don't necessarily want somebody to know where you are. Firearm instructor in town teaches a great class. Part of his class, the one thing that he will teach you, bad scenario, you get in your safe place and you don't necessarily go after that intruder. You wait till that intruder comes to you, and then you do what you have to do to stop it. That's good advice. You don't want the person that has just broke in to know where you're at. The element of surprise is everything. You rack that shotgun, a couple things have just happened. Number one, you've given your position away. They know exactly where you are. Whether you're back in the back room, whether you're upstairs, whether you're in the kitchen, they know where you're at. Number two, they know what you got. They know where you're at and what gun you have. Now, is that a scary situation? Yes. Could it possibly cause them to jump out a window and take off? Yes. If they are really there to do you harm and not necessarily steal your TV or your diamonds or something like that, they're there to hurt you and your family. Don't you think their reaction is going to be, okay, I know where they're at, and I know they have a shotgun, and I know they just racked a shell in it. I better get busy and start shooting in that general direction, or I'm going to get shot. It's argued so much in the gun business. You got to consider things like that. This is a Stoger over and under. Some things I like about this firearm. I can be stealth quiet with it. So with a firearm like this right here, there's no large racking sound. The gun tilts open, you have a sleeve on it here with multiple shells, and you shut the chamber. The gun is fully loaded now. It only has 2 shells in it. The rest of your shells are on the outside, so you got to practice with that, and you got to know that. For some reason, you have to use both of them, bam, bam. Before anything else happens, you take a defense location, knock the 2 out, put 2 more in, be ready to go. It's got a nice short barrel on it. You can come around a corner, whatever you need to do with this firearm, and you don't have that big long barrel sticking out there. And this is also a 20 gauge. For home defense, for the amount of area that you're going to be using this firearm in, a 20 gauge is plenty of power. Now you can pick from buckshot, large BBs, from slugs, 1 single bullet coming out of there, a big piece of lead, triple aught, which would be 3 large marble sized balls coming out, or you can go with like a bird shot with like a number 6 that's going to put a spray pattern, a large spray pattern of tiny BBs that are going to come flying out and cover a whole area. Right. Another reason to have a shotgun as a home defense, things are probably going to go bad late in the middle of the night. You're going to be sleeping. You're going to wake up. Your senses and everything are going to be so scrambled anyways. Are you really going to be able to take a firearm, 1 bullet, and hit a target you need to? Or would it be better to have a shotgun that is going to spray a pattern about this big out that's going to have a lot of stopping power to it. Whatever firearm you decide to buy, do the research, do the training, and put it into practice. Do not buy a firearm, bring it home, or load it, put it in your dresser drawer or your bedstand, and think, okay, I'm ready to go, because it's going to do you no good if things go bad. If you don't know how to use that firearm, it's going to do you no good. It's a huge responsibility. It's a giant responsibility. It's a big step that you've taken. Be responsible with it. Let's say I do have to make that horrible decision nobody wants to make. Before I pull that trigger, before I make that decision that will change my life forever, why not have last minute identification? It's going to be dark. You hit that light, your finger is ready to go on that trigger. Why not make that last minute identification just to make sure it's not somebody mistakenly has broke in, drunk, drugged up. You know where I'm going with it. Now, you can get a pump shotgun in this same size, bang, bang, bang. And you can also get a semi-automatic shotgun, so that may be a choice too, where you put your shells in, and instead of making that racking sound, you put your shells in, and then you just pull the trigger, bam, 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 as many times as you need to, many bullets you have in there. So that's a pretty good choice too, is a semi-automatic in a small gun like this. Thank you for tuning in to LAF Space Film Fest. That's capital LAF Space Film Fest. How to purchase a firearm if you are a beginner. The 7 basic firearms